Hello. All right, so usually the first thing you're worried about when it comes to a bow is, first of all, how to hold it, and then second of all, what do I do with it? Okay, so generally speaking, the only rule you really have to worry about when it comes to holding a bow is just make sure you don't touch the hair. Okay, I know I just did, but it's okay. I wash my hands, all right, because you definitely don't want your oily fingers getting all over the hair and then the rosin not being able to adhere itself to the hair. Okay, so you definitely don't try to touch the hair. After that, it's pretty much up to you. All right, if you are classically trained, they will give you the classic grip, which I am definitely not classically trained, far from it. However, they use this as a point of balance because you want your little finger back here on the turn screw to act as a lever against your thumb, which is located up here on the frog, and your other fingers just to rest. Okay, so I can use my little finger right here to adjust my playing and which angle I want to use in conjunction with my arm. Okay, I've seen several guys do this. There's nothing wrong with that because they ain't touching the hair. But I've seen them do this. I've seen people do this. I've seen even some of the old timers eventually, if their arm's a little short or if their bow is a little long for what they're doing, I've seen them grip it all the way up here before and they can fiddle just fine. Okay, so there's really no laws in how to hold. However, if you can get by doing this, it'll probably serve you the best. Okay, so there is some knowledge involved in that. Next of all, how do you use it in conjunction with this? Well, the first thing, just make sure you're using your entire bow. Okay, a lot of people, this is a very intimidating instrument, believe me. Okay, and a lot of times they'll get very nervous and they'll only use some of the bow. Or if they get quick and they learn or they feel comfortable, probably because their arm is nice and convenient and tucked to their side like my elbow is right now. But what you definitely want to do most of all is try to use as much of the hair as possible. Now, a lot of the pros that I've heard, they'll advise you to use the second half or the outside half or the end the most because you're going to have most control over your angle. Okay, because if I play up here real close to my body, it only takes a little bit of pressure or a little bit of angle change for me to completely change string. It only takes a little bit, so there's not much margin for error. However, if I use the tip of my bow, I have all this room to change my string, which means there's a lot more room for error, which is why it's preferred to use the outside half or the lower half if possible. Okay, now I mean some techniques and tricks will call for all of it, but generally speaking, when you're up to speed, you're going to use as much outside as possible. All right. Just another note, a lot of it has to do with your wrist position. Okay, um, you definitely do not want to have this wrist locked as you're practicing your full bow strokes because you're going to run out of elbow. Your elbow is eventually going to lock, and then you're trying to work with your shoulder to move the bow. So the trick, just make sure you have a decent grip. It doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be tight. Okay, so just something that rests, and you use the weight of the bow. I don't even have to push down on my bow. All I have to do is just draw it across whatever string I want. But what you're noticing about my wrist is that when it comes up, I'm all bent very far out with my wrist, and then as I extend my arm, my wrist straightens out to the very tip of the hair, and now my wrist looks like, let me see if I can get that right. There we go, something like that. Now my wrist looks like this. So it goes from here all the way up close, all the way out, sometimes moving in the other direction, which is okay. All right, so your wrist is the true hinge to make sure that your bow stays accurate on the string. because you definitely don't want to be sliding down onto your fingerboard, and you definitely don't want to be sliding up on your bridge. You want it to be nice and even all the way across. And the most reasonable way to do it is to make sure that that wrist hinge works well. Okay, so whether you work close, you work far away, will depend on how your wrist hinges. And just make sure you have nice, good freedom of motion involved. Okay, fiddle work is involved in the elbow.